What would you do if you accidentally discovered the house next door was occupied by something not human? Something horrifying. Something unspeakably evil. No one believes you.
Mom, I didn't have a nightmare.
Not your mom.
They did kill a girl over there.
Not your girlfriend.
Charlie, is this some sort of a trick to get me back?
Not even the police.
Look, I know it's crazy. I know that, but look, Lieutenant!
It knows that you know. You'll do anything to protect yourself, but it will do anything to protect its secret. Fright Night. If you love being scared, this could be the night of your life.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Thursday afternoon as I take this drive here in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So today will mark the 10th entry in our continuing series of Halloween horror. And it will also mark our second vampire film that we've discussed within the last bunch of days. We last talked about The Lost Boys, Joel Schumacher's iconic 1987 high fashion, bizarre fashion. Lots of great music, lots of mood, naked saxophone players, The Lost Boys. And today we're going to talk about the other great vampire film. Well, in my opinion, there are many people that would put, or who would put, Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark in this category. I like Near Dark. I don't love it. I don't know. Movie never worked for me. But one movie that did work for me and does, and I've been a fan of since even before first seeing The Lost Boys, because I happened to see this film first. I was not age appropriate. I was too young, but I watched it anyway. It is Tom Holland, not Spider-Man Tom Holland, the other Tom Holland. It is Tom Holland's terrific 1985 comedic horror, Fright Night. And whereas The Lost Boys tells a kind of cockeyed Peter Pan story of boys who won't grow up, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because they're vampires and they look like they're 18, but maybe they're 200 years old. We don't really know. Fright Night has more of a conventional horror film structure and unfolding. And as I've discussed in the past, this movie does follow the so-called complex discovery plot that Noel Carroll lays out in his really incredible academic work, The Philosophy of Horror. But we'll get to that. So in Fright Night, you have a young kid. I guess he's a senior in high school. He has a girlfriend. They're in love. He wants to have sex. She wants to wait. There's a lot of that kind of normal teen angsty stuff in this particular film. And he has a next door neighbor. You know, he seems like a nice enough guy. He's very attractive, played by Chris Sarandon. In the pre-internet days, I was under the impression that Chris Sarandon and Susan Sarandon were brother and sister. They are not. They were never. They were married. And this is a sort of information that now it's a half a second. And I went 15 years thinking they were brother and sister because in the 80s, this kind of information you couldn't get it at the snap of a finger. So Chris Sarandon plays next door neighbor. He's just moved in and his name is Jerry Dandridge. And yeah, he's an attractive guy. He's charming. He's also a vampire. And young Charlie Brewster, his girlfriend, William Ragsdale, very, very solid actor, had a good career. In later years, he was on a kind of cult TV show on the old Fox when they had a comedy lineup. It was called Herman's Head, a very unusual show, which I feel like there were concepts that were pretty much stolen from it. And later TV shows, you know, where you kind of the interior thought process of a character or whatever the case might be. But William Ragsdale does a good job in the lead as Charlie Brewster. And another future TV star, Unmarried with Children, Amanda Bearse, plays Amy, his girlfriend, who wants to hold hands and kiss a little bit, but she's not really interested in pulling off all her clothes just because her boyfriend is in the mood. We get that. We understand. But the problem is that the next door neighbor, guy's a vampire. There's no doubt he's a vampire. Charlie has seen him attack what I think is supposed to be an escort. It's a little bit of a Jack the Ripper angle if you want to go that route. But he's got to do something. And as luck would have it, there is a major TV star who is a self-proclaimed vampire hunter named Peter Vincent. And Peter Vincent is played by really one of the acting goats, even though he was only nominated for one Academy Award. But one of the goats, Roddy McDowall. Now, Roddy McDowall, 45 years prior, as more or less a child actor, plays the lead character of Hugh in John Ford's How Green Was My Valley. Unfortunately, How Green Was My Valley is a bit of a notorious film, not because of anything contained within How Green Was My Valley, but it's the movie that stole the Best Picture Oscar from Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. Because Orson Welles became public enemy number one because he dared to cross William Randolph Hearst, I guess, and Hedda Hopper went after him, I guess. I mean, not I guess, that's what happened. But Roddy McDowall, an extraordinary theatrical, theater-trained performer who was a great film actor. And this is the kind of juicy role that an older actor, as McDowall was no longer playing leads, can take it and just have a fucking blast. And he looks to be having the time of his life interacting with the young actors and actresses and Jerry Dandridge, Chris Sarandon. Now, because Charlie is a kid, he doesn't really think his plan of getting Peter Vincent involved, he doesn't really run it through the mental meat grinder the way, I gotta be honest with you, even me at age 17, I would not for 1 second think that a TV star who plays a vampire hunter on TV, I would not think that he would be able to help me. I would not default to that, oh yeah, of course he'll be able to. No, I don't think so. He's a fucking TV star. He's an actor. This is, the old Mr. Miyagi, this no tournament, this for real. This ain't no TV show. I got an actual real life vampire living next door to me. I don't know that in the world of the movie, he goes to him and the resistance in the early moments of them interacting, because Roddy McDowall's Peter Vincent knows that he's just an actor. He doesn't believe in any of this hooey. This is all nonsense. Well, when I mentioned how this film follows the tenets, it fulfills the 4 phases of the complex discovery plot of onset, discovery, confirmation, and confrontation. To lay it out more precisely, because this film is just about perfect in this regard. The onset is Charlie Brewster is living a quiet, middle-class life. His mom is a little wacky, but she's not presented as a troll. This is not a dysfunctional family. He and his girlfriend are not in a dysfunctional relationship. He just wants to have sex with her. And the movie doesn't necessarily present him as a negative kind of a force. He's horny. He wants to have sex with his girlfriend. And Amanda Bearse is such a resourceful actress. She's really good in this film and where her character goes and all of that. No spoilers. But onset is that, and it is right up until the moment that Charlie sees something that he shouldn't see, and he is spotted by Jerry Dandridge. And then a body, another body, or there is a story that a lady of the night has disappeared, or there might be a murder, and that's the discovery, which Charlie is not surprised because he knows what he saw. Now, the irony of the confirmation in this film is we're talking about, in the immortal words of George Clooney, in From Dusk Till Dawn a decade later, we're talking about fucking vampires. And as George also says in that film, I don't even believe in vampires, but that's what we're dealing with. That's where we are right now. I don't believe in it, but these are vampires. So Peter Vincent, TV vampire hunter, legend, He doesn't believe in vampires. They don't exist, you stupid kid. Well, the confirmation phase in a horror film is that moment when the dissenting voice among the primary cast realizes, holy shit, there's a werewolf, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, head vampire in The Lost Boys, or Jerry Dandridge is a vampire. Well, the irony, as I'd mentioned, in this film is that the vampire hunter, who is not really a vampire hunter, who doesn't believe in vampires, he's just an actor, he serves as the confirmation because he realizes, son of a bitch, this kid is right. Jerry Dandridge is a vampire. I'll see ya, and I wouldn't want to be you. So, and this is funny, he tries to bail. He doesn't want to get involved. Yeah, that's great, kid. He is a vampire. Congratulations. I'm out of here. But there is something in Peter Vincent, theatrical performer. There is something in him that makes him want to stay the course, see this through, even if it costs him his life. Because Charlie is so earnest and Amy is so sweet. And their other friend, I forgot the name of the character, the actor Stephen Jeffries, was terrific in a number of movies from that decade. He's even in a film called Fraternity Vacation with a very young Tim Robbins. And he has a great, juicy horror film role in a later movie from that decade called 976 Evil. Very distinctive actor, Stephen Jeffries. Terrific. Someone for you to Google. So Peter Vincent decides, let's kill ourselves a vampire. And the film has a really nice balance of the real and the surreal and the supernatural. And that's not necessarily something that The Lost Boys, Joel Schumacher's not really, that's not one of his things that he's going for in The Lost Boys. But this movie has a very deft balance between the practical special effects, the computer work, and quite frankly, some of the gross out stuff. The Lost Boys kind of pulls back, and that's to the movie's credit, that it's not as graphic as we remember. It's not as gross as it could be. Fright Night has moments of pretty intense and significant gore. Through it all, and this is a little bit crazy to even contemplate, but when this movie came out and the reviews were very solid, as I said, it got better reviews. And if you go on Rotten Tomatoes right now, The Lost Boys, I believe when I last checked, was about 75 to 80%, which is good. Again, horror movies tend to be graded on a negative curve. A horror film has to be top-notch to even get a fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know why that is. It's very difficult for the genre because a lot of critics just don't like horror movies, it seems. And I would have said that when I was a kid before I became, film student, etc., etc. But The Lost Boys, 76% on Rotten Tomatoes, a terrific score. Fright Night is at 83%. A phenomenal score for a flat out, full out, balls out, no pun intended, vampire movie. And the film did so well with critics that the studio, I think that Warner Brothers pulled the trigger on this one. I think that they put the money in. I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% on that. But whichever studio funded this film and was responsible for the marketing and for the distribution of the movie, they actually thought that there was a slot where Malcolm McDowell could get a Best Supporting Actor nomination. Now, it's easy for me to sit here almost 4 decades later as an enormous fan of this film, and I think this film is every bit as good as The Lost Boys. It's completely different. You can't find 2 vampire movies more disparate than The Lost Boys and Fright Night. But I love Roddy McDowall's performance. He's the highlight of the film, and every line reading, because he's playing an actor. And the real Roddy McDowall was resourceful enough where you sense him calibrating every scene. Is he putting on a performance for the kids within the scene, or is he just Roddy McDowall as Peter Vincent? It is a really great performance. And you can see the gears turning in the great old actor who, as I said, only had 1 Oscar nomination. He wasn't nominated for How Green Was My Valley. I forgot. There was some kind of weird thing that happened where he was nominated It may have been for Cleopatra in the 60s. I'm not 100% on that. But there was some sort of a weird filing error, and this is something that came up a few years ago where there was a filing mistake. But in the case of McDowell, I don't think that his nomination stood, and I think they had to pick somebody else because of some weird clerical mistake that happened. But anyway, it's not really that important. He was a boss. He was a great actor. And in this movie, he hits a home run. Because Chris Sarandon, although didn't necessarily have an enormous career, he's a very intimidating actor. And in this movie, he is scarier when he is the kind of attractive next door neighbor. I feel like he's scarier when he's in his human form, spoiler alert, as opposed to vampire form. And there is something to be said for an actor who can do that. And it's also a terrific performance, and not just a good horror film performance, but he has a way, the way that he relates to the other actors. He has these moments of seduction with the girlfriend Amy, and Amanda Burse, as I said, is very strong in these scenes. She holds her own. Even the character of Charlie's mom, I don't know the actress, but she comes across like a real person. She's a little vacant and almost seems a bit of a bubblehead, but you could say the same about Diane Wiest in The Lost Boys a few years later. Diane Wiest is an incredibly resourceful actress, and she plays the hell out of that part of Lucy in The Lost Boys. But Fright Night is one of those films. I don't know anybody who has seen it who does not say, oh yeah, it's great, I love this movie. And I'd say the same about The Lost Boys. Most people who've seen Near Dark, kind of the other great vampire film of the decade, I mean, I like it. I'd give Near Dark 3 stars out of 4. I don't have it on the level of Fright Night and or The Lost Boys, which to me are both between 3.5 and 4 stars. Not even close. They're just terrific films. Now, this movie, though, has those 4 phases of horror, and the climax of the film, the stakes are higher than you might expect because it's not just Charlie against Jerry. As with The Lost Boys, there are so many different pieces and components and so many people whose lives are at stake. Vampires, half vampires, and then just regular people, like Sam, the Corey Haim character, and even the Frog Brothers. They're kind of comic relief, but they're out there trying to kill vampires, and the stakes are very high. Well, this film starts off seemingly as a smaller, more interior story, but by the last half hour, the stakes are pretty high. And you don't really know exactly how it's going to turn out. I mean, you can kind of guess this isn't going to be the sort of film with a brutal ending. And I remember when they did the remake about 12 years ago with Colin Farrell in the Chris Sarandon role of Jerry Dandridge. Farrell is almost too good of an actor for that part, but I actually prefer Chris Sarandon's performance because Colin Farrell is just incredible, and he's funny, but I don't think the character of Jerry Dandridge, I don't think the humor really works. The remake is just okay. It also stars the unfortunate, tragic Anton Yelchin, who is really great in that movie. But I think the original is better. And there are movies where I say that, the remake is just as good or maybe it's even better. There are people that would say, well, certainly 3:10 to Yuma, the film with Christian Bale and Russell Crowe, I'm not even familiar with the original. They say, no, the remake is much better. Now, another remake where I think people who thought it was better than the original, taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, the remake with John Travolta and Denzel is okay. The original with Robert Shaw and Walter Matthau, I think, is a better film. But that's also not critically important. Fright Night is one of those movies that it has a high rewatchability factor like The Lost Boys. And I would say that I've probably seen the 2 films an equal number of times from start to finish. Fright Night has those moments, those famous sequences that we can watch again and again, and not just because special effects are dazzling us, because there's just like really cool parts. Quentin Tarantino used to talk about his process. You think about the coolest episode of Charlie's Angels, and that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of energy I want. Let's do something that's just as cool as the coolest episode of Hawaii Five-0. Fright Night has a lot of those memorable moments that we look forward to seeing again and again. And the special effects, although you would call them dated now, they still hold up. because the way that they use the computer work sparingly, and most of what we see are practical effects, some pretty sick makeup work, and some explosions where I think Edlund and the team were able to kind of blend practical with computer in a way that it still works. I don't believe anybody would watch this film and say, oh, it's just too dated, you can't get into it. And when I think about classic horror, the best of it, the effects work is seamless, and it remains believable. You look at something like Ghostbusters, which, I mean, it's a comedy, but that also has horror film elements, and Richard Edlund worked on that film as well. I believe it was the last movie that he worked on big-scale production before working on Fright Night. But the computer work and the process shots, the matte paintings, and the effects work in Ghostbusters, it's dated, but it still holds up. There's nothing that calls attention to itself and says, oh my God, you couldn't do this now, this is terrible, or whatever. So as we speak, Fright Night is streaming free on Max, which would, it would kind of indicate that it probably was a Warner Brothers production, because Warner Brothers and HBO, they had a lot of productions in the 80s, such as The Witches of Eastwick, I believe was a co-production between those two studios. But Fright Night is a great horror film and a great vampire film. It's not easy to get vampire movies right. There have been so few top-end vampire movies. You look at something like what they did with Frank Langella in the late 70s, it's not good. And you want to talk about an actor fitting a part perfectly. Frank Langella, you couldn't have cast that film better. It doesn't work. It's more or less inert. I feel like in this instance, the fact that they took the risks and went with a bit of a comedic angle in both Fright Night and The Lost Boys. You see, it's interesting because here I said that one of the problems with the remake of Fright Night is that the way that Colin Farrell was almost winking at the audience, I didn't feel like it worked. But the way that Chris Sarandon as Jerry Dandridge in Fright Night is playing the material right down the middle. He's playing it as straight as possible, and he is playing it in as horrifying a way as he can, especially when he looks like his human self. Great acting all around in a movie that you wouldn't necessarily expect it. And I'm a little sad that Roddy McDowall didn't get that wacko off-the-wall Best Supporting Actor nomination, because the studio did promote it. There were ads all over the trades. I've actually seen them where they were saying that, and one critic said, McDowell's performance is simply astonishing. This is the best performance of his entire career. He didn't get nominated. It's okay. But his performance, as you watch it, you see what he does with his eyes, what he does with his face, his body language. And there is a moment, this is a mild spoiler, where his character starts to really believe. And it's the best moment in the film, where he now understands this is a vampire. And I may have played a vampire hunter on TV, but right now I am a vampire hunter. Fuck this guy. And it is extraordinary what Malcolm McDowell does just in that one scene. Excuse me, Roddy McDowell, not Malcolm, does in that one scene. It's just marvelous. Fright Night, directed by not Spider-Man, Tom Holland, but the Tom Holland who was a filmmaker throughout the 80s and 90s, and starring William Ragsdale, Amanda Bearse, Chris Sarandon, and a fantastic Roddy McDowall. The 10th entry in our continuing series of Halloween horror. Fright Night, as I said, just to repeat, is freely available and streaming on Max as we speak. This has been episode 343 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Thursday afternoon here with me in New York. If you catch this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, welcome to Fright Night. For real. Peace.